everybody. Welcome back for a brand new Incredible Polcast. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we're going to be talking about our new series, The Incredible Pol Farm, episodes 7 and 8, Taking Down the Barn. And today, I have some special guests. Unfortunately, my co-host, my wife, Beth, couldn't join us today, but don't worry. We have some exciting guests today. We have my brother-in-law, Ben, executive producer, John Collin, and executive producer, Emily Hyman. It's great to have everybody with us today. We're going to be talking about the barn episodes because this is the one episode when we first discussed this show. You saw this episode, John, as kind of one that where the barn story would live over 2 episodes. It was one of the only stories we did all year that spanned 2 episodes. Do you want to talk about that for a little minute about the thought process and extending that barn takedown over 2 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, there was no thought process when we were actually making it, because when we were making these episodes, we were making our episodes, and we moved to we moved to a half-hour format. Or sorry, let's back up for a second. The vet show, the original show, is an hour episode. We were following in that like well-trod footsteps. And when we put together the first episode, there was a lot of thought and consideration behind, like, is this the best format for what we're doing here? Because, well, if viewers have stuck with the show long enough to reach to this point, they know that these are half-hour shows. And so but we had already shot like the entire season, or like more than half of the season. And so this was actually a tricky episode because when we made the show, there was no consideration. It was perfect. It would run, for the entire 45-minute show. So we had to figure out where do we break the episode? When we went to retrofit the episodes into half hours, this was one of the challenging episodes because we had to find a break, a cut point within the shows to sort of have a little cliffhanger and then to get into the second episode. So that it's almost the opposite of how you set that question up. So
I would also say this whole process of taking the barn down, there was so much content. It was hard to get it even to its current state of 2.5 hours, or even an hour. It would have been a really hard hour to cut down. I mean, there was so much great. There was just, it's a complicated process. There's so much process. Also, Charles, I think this might have been your favorite. This is actually a question for you. Was this your favorite thing we did? Because you were just like a kid in a candy store every day. Like couldn't be happier to be in and among the beams.
Yeah, I love this episode. I love this project. Being able to take something and save it was super cool for me. I guess I have a little bit of my dad in me, and he's always kind of like that guy that if he finds something super cool that's old and he can figure out some way to repurpose it, or that he's going to do that. He always kind of did that. And so this episode's kind of that, taking something, saving it from the scrap heap, and then repurposing it into something new and reusing it. Like, it speaks to me on a super high level. But then I love playing around with the big equipment, and so it's super cool to throw on those straps and go like 40 feet in the air. Although, Ben, I think that was not your favorite part, of the episode.
that was my secret.
There are multiple things that I want to say right now. first, shout out, like, absolutely Nomadic Films. Emily, you live up to your reputation, and you just straight up asked Charles a question like we were still filming right now, and you just went right back to him on that, which
Who's
I give you
producing
massive
who?
always producing. That's great. Like that is like perfect. The second thing, there were a lot of things that happened during that whole barn takedown, and yeah, there was it. I mean, you guys showed it in 220 for 222-minute episodes, but there was a lot that went into that. Um, I can only imagine the content that you guys had to filter through to pick out the best parts. I will say that these GoPros, man. I mean, you guys wanted to put GoPros everywhere, and I swear, I don't think you used any footage except for like in a few places. And when you do, it was like perfect timing. Hence where I fell. It was just
We'll
in the
get to that
exact.
in a moment.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't want to give any spoilers away,
Spoiler.
but yeah. So yes, I'm not a huge fan of heights, as everyone could see. And Charles, I love the fact that you couldn't bend over and cut those nails, so I got to hang outside the basket and do it. So thank you for that, Charles.
It wasn't me being scared of hanging out of the basket. It was me being scared of dropping the buzzsaw or the sawzall like down, breaking the sawzall, breaking somebody's head open. Like I just envisioned that I would be dropping the sawzall and away it would go, because that's something totally I would do, is drop the sawzall. Plus, I'm not sure if I was the one who fell out of the basket, if the harness would hold me. I mean, honestly, let's be real, right? Like,
Uh,
maybe the
We
thing
bought the good.
snaps, maybe.
We bought the good ones, Charles. Don't worry, you
Oh,
were all
okay.
set.
We were rated for me. Um,
Yeah.
no, this episode, it really was my favorite. It was the one that I was really looking forward to, and yeah, it was super exciting to be able to find a barn. We weren't sure whether we were going to find a barn. That process was like, I knew that we wanted to find a barn and take down a barn. And there's a little bit longer story that it's like one of the things, you can't cover everything when you're doing the series, and you have to pick and choose. And so like a story that is kind of behind the scenes is, when we were doing the sizzle, we took down a barn in Frankenmuth, but we didn't actually film it for the sizzle like we were going to. But I didn't have the crew. I can't remember why we didn't film it. We filmed at the barn. We have footage of us touring the barn for the sizzle, but we didn't actually get the footage of us taking down the barn. But we had this process, and I just remembered how cinematic it was, and like how much I regretted not having the crew there to shoot us taking down this barn. And so we took down this barn for the sizzle, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. We need to do this for the series. And I could use another barn. I could figure out like how to put these two barns together, because that's generally what farmers have done in this area, is when they put up one barn and they kind of outgrew that, they would just put up another barn and kind of attach it to it. So there was, I was confident, and we looked. Ben was like, if we do this again, you should look for a bank barn, something that would be like a 2-story barn. So I drove around and I talked to this Bill Klein, who was the barn guy that we knew, and he's like, well, there's this bank barn. I drove around, and I would look at this bank barn, I would look at that bank barn, and we found one, and we had to talk to the people, and we weren't sure whether we would. It was kind of late in the game, but it actually worked out that that we'd be able to tour this barn. And I can't remember. I think maybe it was definitely Beth's first time when we filmed it and we toured the barn. I think it was her first time seeing it. Ben, it was only maybe your second time seeing that barn, when we went there with the cameras at that point.
Yeah, it was I think the second time I went and looked at it originally just to make sure that everything was good. And from there it was kind of like, okay, we're gonna buy this barn and we're gonna take it down. And Beth, I think Beth was amazed at one, the size of it, but then two, also it being of being a bank barn, which was great because I really think it's going to be awesome for season 2 when we put up a bank barn.
Yeah, we keep watching, keep streaming, folks. Keep streaming, binging. If you
Yes.
binge the show,
Multiple
watch it
times.
again. Watch it again.
Yeah.
Watch it on Hulu. Go over to Hulu and watch it on Hulu so we can get that season 2. Um, th- I talked to you guys like John, Emily. I was talking about taking down this barn. Was when we were discussing it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be really great." Did you envision what you filmed, or were you totally like, was it like surprise you with how like grand of a process it was?
Emily? No, like I'm not an engineer. I've never been around construction. I've never been around barns. I've never seen a barn taken down. I've never seen a barn put up. I no, like I had no idea. And I think that I think for everything else we filmed, I think we had like a basic idea of what we were going to see. And so, from a producing standpoint, we can sort of almost get ahead of the action, and we can plan like where our cameras are going to be and make sure that we're getting all the sort of shots we need and all the best action. But this whole process was just playing defense. It was just like leaving the cameras on and like letting you, and because you guys had so much work to do, I think that we filmed that over about a week. And like we couldn't really like get ahead or produce you because you guys just needed to work your butts off and work as quickly as you could. So every time something new happened, it was like, okay, I guess we'll film this. And so we were making a lot of sort of like live, decisions from our side, like live, because it was just like, okay, well, I guess can we break for lunch now, or are you about to see a huge beam taken off the barn? So it presents a lot of challenges, but it was, I mean, and you can see it, especially in the second episode, like when you start really sort of removing those huge beams, like that was dangerous. I mean, but Ben, you fell, like that was probably the most dangerous moment. But like if a rope had snapped or something, like all I could think about the entire time was like my crew, sitting underneath these like these multiple ton logs. Like it was, yeah, it was terrifying, but it was also, it was really exciting to see that process. So I'll never forget that. And it also, yeah, you talk about like season 2, like I regardless if there's a second season, if you put that up ever, I want to come out and like participate because it just looks so. It's going to be an amazing process. Like I imagine taking a barn down takes like a week, but putting it up, I can't imagine the sort of like, how difficult that would be. Looking at you, Ben.
I really don't know what to say. I will tell you that obviously you guys knew I was very concerned about safety, especially with the camera crew, because everybody has a camera in their face and they're trying to get the action and not really looking out for anything. And I made you guys wear these awesome yellow vests, which I'm sure we've got a picture of it that what Charles can like post in this so that everybody can get a good glimpse of it of you guys in these yellow vests during that time. Emily, I think you added it to your wardrobe, did you not?
Oh yeah, no, I I wear it all the time. I'm in the room. Sometimes I sleep in it.
She
But
showed up.
what
She showed up at a
I
bar after filming one night in the vest. So
I did do
yes.
that. Yeah, that I did do. So all the kids at CMU would know exactly who I am. But the the one thing I'll say about safety and GoPro is that and drone is that actually because of both safety and also just the logistics of not literally not watching the whole episodes for like up. I think we used a lot of different tools more than in other episodes, other cameras to try to be creative so that we were not in your way and we had the best to try to do justice to what you guys are doing. So I think visually, particularly when those beams start coming down, it's one of my favorite footage. The drone, like how the drone follows these things, I think it's really cool.
So we'll get to the elephant in the room because we've already discussed it, but there was a moment where Ben does fall, and it was pretty crazy. From my perspective, we had gone up together. It was a a peg, or that we were trying to separate two boards, and I can't remember if it was, I think it was screwed together. We had taken the pegs out, and there was something holding the board. So Ben had to go up and was sawzawing these two pieces apart, and we had taken a bar off the basket in order to be able to get down underneath it in sawzall on our hands and knees, and we were quite high. I mean, because it's a bank barn, there's the ground level, and you're like 18 feet above ground, but then there's another 10 or 12 feet because of where the ground was from where we could roll up to it. So we extended up, we boomed up on the thing, and the telehandler, and we were up there, and we were Ben went up, and he sawzawed this, and I said to him, "Are you getting out of the basket?" Because I hated it when he got out of the basket, because I like, I'm not scared of heights, but getting out of the basket, I'm dreadfully clumsy. So at any time the idea of getting out of the basket like would terrify me, because I would be the guy to misstep, and then boom, down I go, dangling by the strap. Like, who knows what that would do. And so I remember saying, "Are you out of the basket?" So I was so focused on like him being out of the baskets, like on the side of the building, and then he's like, okay, he got done, and he handed the tool to me, and I was turning around, and next thing I know, I just see him like fall past me, like towards out of the basket, but not quite. Like, you landed. So Ben, from like, when you missed that step, I can't tell you how close do you know how close you came to falling out? Like, were you aware? Because like, you were really close to falling out. Like, you were, maybe, if had I not grabbed the back of your strap, maybe you would have rolled off the side. I don't know. Were you aware how bad this was when you slipped and you fell?
Yes. Honestly, I didn't think I was gonna stop, to tell you the truth. I thought I was just going until the harness caught me. I was very happy that I got caught by the basket at the moment. But yeah, with us, we took off. There's a middle bar on that basket, and you can see it in the footage. It's gone. We had taken it off for something when we were reaching out of the basket, and we never put it back on. So when I went to step down, I just assumed that that bar was there, and that's really what caused me to fall. Is I was anticipating that bar being there and my foot hitting it, and it didn't, and I just went down, and I was very happy to hit the basket and not be dangling by my harness.
At the time, you were happy about it. When you got up and you realized how sore you were from hitting that basket, I'm not sure if the harness would have been worse, or if the basket, like hitting like full on to the basket, because it was like your body, your legs were off, and your backside was off the basket. It was actually what, your ribs and your shoulder that caught it.
And my wrist, I think my wrist was probably like the biggest thing, because as I started to fall, I realized that there was nothing there, and I was trying to kind of hold on, so it twisted my wrist pretty good. But yeah, I was very sore the next day. I think there was some ibuprofen involved for day two of barn takedown, or barn transport, I should say.
So from on the ground, John, Emily, now let me ask you, because like, it was scary for me, because I was just like, oh my gosh, and I felt like it was my responsibility to try to catch you, and I was like, I was literally, you picked the moment where I'm putting the tool down, and I'm looking behind me to like, and I just see out of the corner of my eye like a yellow streak streaking down. But so, John, Emily, you're on the ground, you're completely helpless. Like, what was going through your mind when you saw Ben, like,
Did
did you think he was going down too, or
get
did
it?
you not
Get the
Yeah.
notice?
shot?
Hey, wait, be honest. Was everybody doing their job covering?
It all happens very quickly. It's like, okay, he's caught, he's moving, he's okay. Where are my camera people? Because obviously that's like, it's a critical moment for us. So yeah, my brain is sort of like going in two very different directions. But yeah, I mean, like that um, could have been a lot worse. Like as you guys are saying, and I don't know, like that's one of those things I think as a producer where it's like I don't really, you sort of just take it as it is, and then it's like it's sort of like at lunchtime or in the evening, it's like you kind of run through all the worst scenarios that could have happened, and so
The call to the insurance company. Uh,
yeah, the called my bosses back in that geo, like we don't have a show anymore, guys. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, we do. He was caught. So, I mean, it was kind of like there were some moments I think that uh when we took down those beams on top, see that's because there's when that spot where you fell, Ben, that I mean that was high, but you were maybe 20 feet. The bad thing would have been was the tree that was right next to us and hitting the tree branches or hitting a beam when you're swinging down would probably have been worse than when you were caught. But when we first started, when you're first taking off those roof and those trusses, like especially on the one side of the building where we're on the bank barn, we're like 40 feet. We were maxed out on the height of that telehandler. And it was like, what, 35-foot lift, 35, 40 feet. And you don't realize how tall that is until then. I think that was the moments where even though it was kind of exhilarating and you feel that adrenaline rush being up that high. That was the moments where I think like even my stomach was kind of like starting to leave, and especially when we had to dangle out to cut those things. You just want them to come up. You just want to get the crowbar and pry it, and it for those trusses to pop up. And then so often we would have to we would have to get down on our hands and knees hanging off the side of it with the sawzalls we were talking about before. Those, I think those were the worst moments. And then your heart kind of like every time we got one loose, my heart would kind of go in my throat. Like, are we going to catch this or is it going to go tumbling down? Because those moments are terrifying too. like because you know you 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 don't know how it's going to bounce and where that thing can land if we lose it. What how did you take that when we went up for those trusses?
Well, I want to say a few things. Net like um during this process, we want to be as accurate as we can as far as the different information that we put out there. And Emily is very good at questioning all of the information that goes into this. So good job, Emily. The one thing that we talked about was this barn, and this was a big thing because realistically, yeah, the height of the barn is about 31, 32 feet. But a lot of the work or a chunk of the work that we did, we were doing it from the bank barn side, which added another 10 to 12 to 15 feet to it. I don't know exactly the number off the top of my head. So we were really pushing more like 45 feet in the air. So it was higher than what it looks like really kind of on camera because we were doing everything from that bank side. And yeah, 45 feet is no joke. I mean, that's up there, especially when I don't like heights. So we'll leave it at that, I guess. I'm glad I was very relieved as the taller section started to come off. Like it was literally like I could feel my blood pressure coming down. Every beam that came off the top was blood pressure dropping at the moment.
I actually think it was the opposite. You guys were worried about like the second day because once we started, that's the other thing. Like this whole process took a week, but once we started taking it down, we had to do it basically in 2 days because we were destabilizing the structure of the barn. So when we took the top section off and we took the roof off, we basically, those beams had to come down because any inclement weather, any wind like that, it could just, the whole thing could come down. So that second day we had to get all the big beams down. And as you're saying, like there was a certain level of danger, but I think for us that second day was a little bit more relieving because it was like that was more like Lincoln logs. You just pound out those pegs and you hook the straps on. We had multiple sky tracks or telehandlers, so I felt like it went smooth because we had, Ben and I had done this before. So when we got like the top part made me nervous, especially with the bank barn side. But once we got to like taking the thing, the actual barn down, it was like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, this is how you kind of have to do it. And we learned some things. After the first time, I think the first barn we took down, we cracked a beam, and we learned some things about like taking them apart and how they come apart. So I felt like, for me anyways, I was like kind of like riding a bike again. Ben, like being the second barn, like how did you feel when we got to that section? Did you feel like it was like riding a bike again and you were just getting back up there, or was it its own challenge?
No, I would agree, Charles. I think it felt like riding a bike, and we had a good understanding of the direction that we were going to go with this. I will tell you that John and Emily, I think we had a conversation. Well, we had conversations a lot in the morning, and they're like, "Okay, what's game plan? What are we doing today?" And I'm like, "We're taking down the barn, hell or high water. Like it's coming down." So I don't know, just start filming and figure it out. I think was kind of the direction that I went with it. And you guys, props, man. You stuck in there and you got what you wanted. And I don't think Charles, you and I weren't stopping for anything. I think that was probably one of the only days during this entire film process that it was like, no, we're not doing a takeoff right now. We're just doing this. That's it.
You know what I was thinking about? I actually don't think we say in the episode that one of those beams is a tree, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about how it's hand hewn and like how big they are, but like that is a tree that has been debranched and debarked.
Yeah.
So,
Way to pull out the shortcomings of the show, Emily. Thanks.
well, that's a good, it's like they learned from the
No, it's a
barn,
great
Frank
point. Great
barn.
point. It's
I
totally
listened to
missed.
this
We totally
episode.
missed.
Guys,
Yeah.
this space, it's not just Hulu and Disney Plus. It's here on this podcast where I
Yes.
podcast.
Where we learn. This is where
Where
we
we learn.
learn.
But
We
yeah, it's
learn
a
the
whole
elements.
tree.
It is
That's
a
what
tree.
we're
It is
we're
a
talking
tree.
about.
There'll be a second opportunity though when we put it back up. We can talk about how that beam is a tree. So you make that note, put it in the season 2 file.
I think we ought to do a graphic of a tree growing and then cutting it down and then having Charles hand hew it like a cartoon character of Charles hand hewing that into a beam. I think that would be perfect
With my
for,
shirt off.
you know, with your shirt off. Yes.
What show are we making now?
I don't know.
What network?
My dad gets to take his shirt off all the time. I'm kind of jealous. I want to, next season, there's gonna be a lot more of that. Just telling you, I'm getting in that farm fish shape so that we can.
I can't wait for season 2. Whatever show that's getting made is wonderful.
So, I'll have a confession here. So we talked about Ben's fall, and there's a little behind the scenes thing that I'm going to share right now. So I will share that for me, I think of all the shows, I was probably in the worst mood at the start of the barn takedown, and I'm not quite sure why. I felt like there was some stressful stuff going on, and John, there was the first day. I'll never forget this. The first day, you were trying to get me to talk about it, and I was just really not in the mood to play along. And like I had given you some grief. We did some takes, and then you wanted to murder me. I think you took me aside and we kind of talked through some stuff, and then we went back in and we got it, and then I got my flow and everything like that. But just, when I will say, so I owe you an apology. I was in a bad mood. That's all right. But like when you're dealing in reality and you need to get what you need to get, is there challenges like that with working on the show with Ben and I, of like breaking us out of the moment or the stress that we're in to get us to refocus? Did you find that to be a challenge throughout this series
Yeah.
to break us out of that moment and get us into the filming moments? Or
That was like the fourth or fifth day, like when the barn was about to be taken down. I mean, we had been around that barn the entire time, and the for every day that we were there, and maybe it was more than a week, like it was like, okay, well, it's, I was always asking, like, is it dangerous right now? Like, what's going on? Because it always seems kind of vaguely dangerous to me, but I just was never sure like what was really going on. And so both of you were saying like it's not dangerous until we start taking off the roof, essentially, and taking off those huge logs. So we finally arrived the morning of the day where we're going to take these things off. And I think Emily asked you the first question where she's like, "Are you nervous? We're finally here." And you're like, "Nah, that's fine." We're like, "Okay, let's ask that again in a different way." And then you're like, "Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. Let's get going." So, like for us, for the story that we're telling, because in my mind, and I think that like it really was a dangerous moment. By that point, I really did. I think I understood what was going on. It was like we need to communicate for the audience at home what's about to happen, and so like it was a thing. It was a moment that we really needed. So yes, I was a little testy in that moment, but it's good. I appreciate hearing sort of why why you were in the mood that you were in. And I think
But
if
I
I do
think,
remember correctly, Ben was the one who stepped forward and was like, "All right, guys, this is dangerous."
but
He
I
gave us the
will
bites that we
say,
need.
I think it's a testament to your relationship, John and Charles, and all of our relationships that, we filmed over a year, and we all go have bad days or bad moods or stresses. And when you were having a bad moment, John could pull you aside and you could talk about it. And then you came back and you were ready to participate. Ben was there cheering us in the right direction. And we just moved on. And now a year later, you guys can really hash it out. Talk about what happened.
like go through therapy. This is
Ther-
really therapy. We're
therapy
we're
session.
extracting the poison
I think,
from.
but that was. I want to be clear though. That was an outlier. That's the only time. Like when I think about filming the show, that moment does stand out because it was the only time that happened. I think that generally, like your two chemistry was like so great, and when Beth was in scenes, like you guys, it was fun watching you guys interact and hang out, and it's like if we don't get a bite like that's totally perfect in the moment, or we don't get the thought that's completely perfect, then we have the interviews that we can use later to really explain what's going on and what what to get what we need. So like no, I mean, from a producer's side, I think that this was like a real joy to make because you guys, especially like I think after the first like week of filming the first episode, sort of understood what we were looking for. And when we would step forward and ask you, "Hey, what's going on?" You're like, or I mean, Charles, you've done this for 10 years now, but like, yeah, I mean, you guys understood. So that was a real outlier situation.
Well, it's hard, and I'll talk to Ben. I'll move this next question for Ben, because for me, like when you're on this side of the camera and you're the subject material in a show like this, you live with your heart on your sleeve. You're not playing a character. It's not like you're working as an actor and you're just like, okay, action, I'm gonna be Charles now, and then cut, okay, I can go back to being like whatever it is. You are who you are, and so you have to kind of wear your heart on your sleeve. So when you have those moments that are challenging for you, or you're just not feeling it, it's really hard to separate that and say like, well, I have a job to do here. I have to be on camera. Ben, did you find that challenging? Like John said, I've been doing this for a long time. So, even I had my moments where I was like over it in that moment and just did not want to participate in the filming of a television show in that moment. I just wanted to do what we were doing that day. Did you have those moments on like where you're just like, you just were not, so you found it challenging to hide your emotions from and be like kind of a character in a television show, so to speak?
Yeah, I think everybody at this point knows I wear. I mean, it's pretty typical for me to wear my emotions on my sleeve. And if for some reason I didn't, Emily always knew exactly what was going on in her mind. She was able to pick up on it. So it didn't really matter. Even if I didn't that day, Emily was like, we're just gonna give Ben a minute. And she knew my machine, the machine for me is like a very safe space, right? That is my safe space. I can kind of get in it and move dirt, and I think Emily realized that very quickly. And every time I went to get in the machine, it was get a GoPro and give him a walkie-talkie. So the next thing you know, I have therapy sessions with Emily in the machine, and we did that an enormous amount as time went on. It was every time I went to get in the machine. Are you going to be in there a little while? Give him a walkie. Give him get a GoPro in there. So I guarantee you there is an enormous amount of footage of me in machines once Emily picked up on the fact that the machine was my safe space. But yes, it is difficult. There were mornings. Um, I mean, it's difficult. eh, we went on these binge filming sessions of like 2 to 3 weeks where it's like um Emily and John and you, Charles, were like practically part of my crew. I felt like I mean, I see my crew every day, every morning at 7:30, and it's like, well, you guys are now part of the team and we're doing this. And it's a lot when you spend that much time with someone. Um, it's a lot. And I think it's even harder just in the fact that I can't just go to work and do what I want to do because I have Emily or John or someone piping in and asking me questions like, "So what are you doing?" "Well, what does it look like I'm doing, Emily? I'm filling in the hole with dirt." That's exactly what I'm doing right now. So, there are moments like that where it's like, "Really? I gotta explain this?" But no, it was you guys were great. At the end of the day, I think, we all kept our emotions in check to a certain point, I think, and we did a good job.
I can't remember,
Let
was
me.
this
Let me I
before?
have a question. I have a question for
Go ahead.
Charles.
Yes.
You say you wear your heart on your sleeve, and and I'm quite proud of. I feel like we, captured you guys at your best, and like captured you guys in a really nice way. Like when you film, and I have not seen all 200 plus episodes of the Vet Show. Your role on that show is quite different. Um, you're sort of the leading man of this show. Do you engage in that show in a different way that you do on this show, or do you see sort of that they're kind of the same thing, and you're the same human being, when you're filming on both shows?
uh that's a great question.
I've been dying to ask this question since like we first started filming.
Yeah, the truth is that I think I am, but it's in the editing. You know, they when we first started doing the show in season 1, I remember very specifically some folks at Nat Geo were like, we're Nat Geo, we don't do funny. And it was like it took a while, I think till season 3 and 4, where we kind of, and in season 3 and 4, they highlighted my character a lot more. We went kind of more traditional reality where we'd have these things and adventures that we would follow outside of the clinic. And then it kind of got pared back, and we did less of that as the seasons went on. So there are moments in the show that I think if you went back and watched certain episodes from certain seasons where you would see um like you'd be like, oh yeah, like I see that's this show, except in like a 5 minute segment versus, stretched out over 22 minutes. But then there was a whole, like there are more moments where I'm working on an animal or something serious. It's kind of hard to be like to go into a farm where somebody's worried about their horse, their sick horse that might die, and then just like crack jokes about something, and or be very, the levity of the situation, make light of it. So it's more difficult to do that. My dad and I have moments in the car that I think are fun, but a lot of I think people from who work on the crew would say that like behind the scenes or when we're just joking around on set, then like that's where like you see that this show, but in the behind the scenes moments that don't necessarily make the camera. So if that makes sense, I do. I'm not very good. I'm not a very good actor. I would never be a good actor because I can only play one character, and that's myself. And so
And even
like
that's difficult.
yeah, so it's like, so it's there. I just think you guys allowed us to go to a different space. You allowed us to do funny and to play that, and then like highlight Ben and my relationship, which I think I can't remember. I was going to ask, was this episode did like in filming order? Was this before we did the garden and the pond, or after we did the garden and the pond? I
Before.
can't remember if we did it. It was the first thing we did when we came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was pretty stressful. I was like pretty stressed about this process. I think Ben was too. Like taking down this barn was a lot of work. It was a lot of like early mornings. We were there all day. We were working. And I remember that by time we got into the garden and kind of reworking the sheep hut and the issues that we had there, Ben and I we had our moment, our John, and like the moment that you and I had John, Ben and I kind of had that moment where we were like ready to kill each other one night, and we were just like really, and you just come to those things, and you gotta like that's filmmaking though. That's like in every show that I've ever been on, when there's so much pressure to do this and to pull this off and to make it, and the filming process, and especially when you're doing like big projects on top of filming, there's so much, it's like a pressure cooker, and it's got to
Well,
let
and
itself off.
I think Charles, I think you hit it like right on the head. I'm used to doing big projects, and with work, that's what I do. What I'm not used to dealing with is a production company and a camera crew and a sound guy that are all flying in from across the US for this one specific week or this one specific shoot of 2 or 3 weeks. And it's like, we have to do this, right? So if we get a crappy week of weather, which we live in Michigan and we all know how that happens, it's like you got to deal with it. And we're not sending everybody home for the day and then flying them back out the next day. So there was definitely an added level of pressure there that I typically don't have to deal with, right? So I think that was probably my biggest challenge, and my stress level was probably the worst um, in those moments, because it's like it is October in Michigan, and one day we can have a beautiful 65-degree sunny day when we took down the barn, thank goodness. Or we can, I think 3 days later, I think there was like an inch of snow that happened at some point, and it was 25 degrees, and Emily's like, I'm out of here.
Classic Emily. But I think that that's why this show also works, because there are natural stakes, things like a garden, which on its face might not feel so stressful, actually is, because if you're going to make this weather, it is stressful. And that's a gift as a producer to have those like baked in stakes and timeline.
At the end of the day, you guys planned this whole thing just so that we would be stressed out.
It was a science experiment, really.
There we go.
Yeah, like every television show is in a way. It's yeah, but I mean to follow on with what Emily said, I think that so many other everything else that happened on this farm, there was mistakes were made throughout, but the mistakes lessons were learned. But you know, if a mistake was made here on this barn takedown, the significance of that were so much greater than, you know, if you, I don't know, build the sheep hut in the wrong way, for instance. So yeah, I think that's why this was a very stressful time for you guys and for us. But I think, you know, that's why I'm also so proud of these episodes, because they look so epic, you know, and it's so visually different than the rest of the show, you know, and the story and the sort of like little factoids that you take away from it are so cool and different. It has a really unique identity. So I don't know. Yeah, these are some special episodes, and I mean, I wish we could have done another half hour. It probably wouldn't have been as exciting. It would have just been you guys like removing, you know, like sighting from the barn. But
The director's cut.
the director's cut
We'll
would have,
do the
yeah,
director's cut.
exactly.
There,
This is the yeah.
it was, you know, it's funny because this was the one thing, and I'm trying to think. Besides you falling, Ben, I don't think there was any. This is the thing that went like the smoothest, but I do think that our stress level from this, like that affected the rest of the shoot, like the next 2 weeks, because like I had my moment on camera or off camera rather with, you know, in that time, but like I think like you kind of had your moment on camera where you like kind of broke down a little bit because you were like stressed out and you're missing your family and everything. And it came. Do you think that the stress of this barn like played into that, what happened in the next 2 episodes? Or do you think it was unrelated?
No, I think it was definitely probably some of the stress. Again, you know, we were dealing with that time crunch, and I, for me to, for me with the job that we do, it's very easy for me to be like, okay, we have a job that's an all dirt job, and they're calling for a week of rain this week. Well, I'm gonna push that job the next week so that we can, just kind of, we'll do something different while the weather's crappy, and then we'll go do this one later. Well, we didn't really have that opportunity, so it was like every day I think I was on my phone constantly just looking at the weather, like how are we? Are we going to be able to pull this off? I think the stress from that, once we were actually done with the barn and we had the barn transported back to your house, there was a sigh of relief. But I think definitely, I think that stress level played through then going into the other things that we did. And I just, yeah, I had my moment on camera, and John and Emily were like, thank goodness he did it on camera. That is so perfect. I think.
Coming off real evil in this one.
No, no, no. It's
No.
just how it shook out. If you guys would have been recording the speech or left the cameras running, that's what you had to do, is just tell them never stop filming, and then you would capture me having my meltdown off camera. And in that moment, there was one other moment, and I'll tell you, like it's kind of because it was for next episode, but there was a moment, like I said, Ben and I had kind of a falling out, and we were like had this yelling match, but again happened off camera. And then, you know, like brothers, you just you work it out and whatever. But there was the next day, there was a moment, and I can't, it was with the pond. It was when we were digging the pond and laying the liner out, and I was sitting there on the side of the pond sitting on the liner, and you could tell that I was really like kind of down in the dumps. and I was like not my usual chipper self or making jokes or anything like that. I was just kind of sitting there, and I watch that back now of me sitting there, and it takes me back to like being like, oh, like play that like sad Charlie Brown music in my head, like of me sitting on the side of the pond. But that all that happened. It's just one of those things. I mean, and you talk about the incredible Dr. Pol, and that's one of the funny things. This show was such a cramped shooting schedule because we had to shoot all these things, we had to shoot all these seasons, and then we couldn't like we had to spread it out because it was all seasonal. Where the Incredible Dr. Pol, we have the luxury of having 20 episodes. We shoot for 35 weeks. And so, because the crew's there, if you're having a bad day, if you're having one of those stress moments, they can afford to be like, you know what, like let's go shoot something else, or let's go ride with Dr. Brenda today, and we'll let you and Dr. Pol just go do your things. And so we have those moments of the pressure valve just kind of loosening and letting off the steam in that way because we have the luxury of time. But in this series, we did not have that luxury of time. We had to use every moment, and we had to get what we had to get because there was no extra time. Did you feel that time crunch, John and Emily, like doing this series, that there was this pressure of like, we got 3 weeks, we got to get this done, and it's got to happen?
I mean, Emily would write a schedule at night and then send it to you guys and be like, here's your day tomorrow. And it was like every hour was called for her. So yeah, I mean, you felt that pressure from us because our expectation was that you would show up right on time, ready to film. Yeah, like this was, sometimes we could get away. We could go film the bees with Beth. But there was, because we were really following you, both of you, build this farm. There was no other sort of action to cut away to. So yeah, it was, and yes, like the things that you had to do and the amount of time that we had out there was so small. Not only for our filming, but also Ben has a job back in the city to get back to. Like, yeah, everything had to be crammed into some, if the cameras weren't there, I'm sure it would have taken you a couple of years to put this all together. I'm glad we did it this way. It was awesome. But yeah, the pressure was always there. Mostly it was like, we need to finish this before we leave in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was, because we were only there in a week or two blocks. And if we didn't, it was like, Ben has to go back to work. Our crew has other jobs that they're going to go on to. So yeah, it was it was immensely stressful.
So the last thing, and we're talking a little out of order because we've like talked through this barn and talked through a bunch of cool things. And thank you everybody for joining us. But I have one last like question. So to start this episode, and actually to start our 3-week adventure this time, we went to Ben's Pumpkin Fest, and I'm glad that it made the series. Was that Ben, you obviously have that every year. Was it like great to have John and Emily and the crew there at the Pumpkin Fest? Was it like did you find that to be like a bonding experience, having them at this family event, like and being able to share that with everybody?
I did. I think and honestly, I could have cared less if any of it got filmed. Um but for me, the more the merrier, right? And the more people that I can surround, and John, Emily, obviously I consider you guys friends, and that was something that you happened to be coming into town right around the right time for, to be able to experience that with us. I think at the moment, I mean, you guys know how I am, but I mean, we cooked all kinds of food for you and the camera crew, that was kind of different than we did for everybody else, because I wanted you to really experience the farm, and the fall weather and the pumpkin, like that time frame. And this was just before we kicked off that very stressful moment of starting to take down the barn, right? So I think it was a great kickoff to that shoot. I'm ecstatic that you guys were able to be there, and the camera crew and everybody else involved was able to be there and experience that with our families. I mean, I think this year is 11 years. I think we just did 11 years this year, 10 years this year. I don't even remember anymore. But every year it kind of gets bigger and bigger. And knowing me, I just continue to invite more and more. So maybe you'll see it again in season 2 for a great kickoff to the fall. And I think that was a good transition for you guys, John and Emily, to be able to kind of really push us from that summer into that fall time frame.
It was a wonderful event, and I got to meet your parents, Ben, you parents, and brothers, and I've said this before, but I know that it's important to both me and John. We also, I'm speaking for you, John. We also consider you friends, and to be able to be in an event like that, I think it just, you know, it, it helps us all to each other, and it feels special.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for an all-new Incredi-Pol cast. We'll be back again next Sunday with an all-new episode of the Incredible Polcast. In the meantime, you can watch the Incredible Pol Farms on Nat Geo Wild on Saturdays at 10 p.m. or binge the entire series right now on Disney Plus and Hulu.
Good seeing
you.
everybody.
Bye.
See ya.